Chapter 41 of American History Stories, Volume 2. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. American History Stories, Volume 2, by Laura L. Pratt. Chapter 41. Israel Putnam. This brave general was born in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1718. He was only a farmer boy, and so had very little chance to learn the many things about the wide, wide world that you boys and girls are learning every day. He was a plucky little fellow, though, and was the leader among the boys of his town in all sorts of things, mischief as well as other things, I have no doubt. At school he learned easily all there was to be taught him, and if he knew nothing but the 3 R's, that was not his fault, for that was all little folks were taught in those days. Do you know what people mean when they speak of the 3 R's? Perhaps I shall not tell you the story just right, but this is something like the way it is told. Once in a country village a school board was holding a meeting. One man, rather more educated than the rest, arose and said, "I think, gentlemen, we might put a few more studies into our schools. I should like to see our boys and girls studying about the flowers and the stars. I should like to have them know about the different countries and the different people of this world. I move that a committee be appointed to see what can be done about making the course of study bigger and better and broader for our children." Then a hot discussion followed. One man said it was all bosh. Another said there was no need of knowing about countries or people that were thousands of miles away. Another said he had no money to waste on such foolishness. Another said the stars and flowers wouldn't help a boy to earn his bread and butter half as much as potatoes and squashes would. At last one man arose and said, "I don't care nothing about these new-fangled notions, and what's more, I don't want to know about 'em. You and me was brought up in the district school where we learned our reading and writing and arithmetic. Mr. Chairman, move that we stick to the old way. The 3 R's was good enough for me, and it's good enough for my boys. Yes, sir, the 3 R's. By that I mean readin' and writin' and arithmetic." Well, what has all this to do with Israel Putnam? Not much, after all, perhaps, only to give you an idea of the kind of schools there used to be in those days. It was to this sort of school, where they taught nothing but the 3 R's, that Israel Putnam was sent to get his "larnin'," as his old father used to call it. But as I said before, he was a plucky boy, and took the lead in all sorts of sports. He could climb like a squirrel, run like a hare, leap like a frog. He could, in short, do all sorts of things that boys admire to do. He was very generous and just, but he wouldn't take an insult from any other boy if he could help himself. One time, while yet a little lad, his father took him to Boston. As he stood admiring this new city, which to the little country boy looked so very, very big, another boy across the way called out, "Hello, country! Ain't it about time to milk the cows?" Quick as a flash, the hot-headed lad fell upon the rude city boy, and gave him a thrashing that lasted him for many a day. When Israel Putnam was a young man living on a farm in Connecticut, he was very much troubled by wolf thieving. Morning after morning he would find the number of his sheep and lambs lessened. His neighbors, too, often found their chickens and hens gone, and only a few scattered feathers left to tell the story. One morning, finding a lamb, which was to the farmer the pride of his flock, among the missing, he started forth, gun in hand. "There is a time," said Israel to his neighbors, "when even a wolf had better be taught that the way of transgressors is hard. I propose that we leave our farm work for to-day, and give this thief a good chase." Several of the farmers, ready I suspect for a good time, as well as anxious to catch the wolf, joined in a party, and with Israel, who was always full of dry, "cute sayings," as we Yankees call it, at their head, they started out. They were soon upon the track, and at last, with the aid of their keen-scented dogs, found the wolf's den. It was a deep hollow in a rock, the opening of which was so small that the farmers could only enter one by one, crawling on their hands and knees. "Now we've lost him," said one farmer. "Let's smoke him out," said another. So they built a fire of leaves and brush just inside the cave, but no wolf appeared. "Set the dogs upon him," said another farmer. But the dogs came skulking out, yelping with pain. "We're not going to be beaten in this way," said Putnam. "I'll go in there myself." And so tying a rope round his legs, that the men might draw him out, he crawled slowly in, his gun in one hand and a torch in the other. He soon saw the eyes of the wolf glaring at him from a corner of the cave. Bang! went the gun, and half blinded by the smoke and half deafened by the noise, Putnam was dragged out by the farmers. Reloading his gun, back he went and fired again, and again he was pulled out. For the third time he entered, and finding the animal was dead, he hauled her out by the ears, while his companions pulled him by the rope round his legs. His clothes were all torn off his back, and his face black with smoke and powder. But he had killed the wolf, and kept her skin as a trophy. During the whole time of the Revolution, Israel Putnam was one of the foremost in every danger. After one battle, he found that 14 bullets had passed through his clothing, not one of which had injured him in the least. At another time, when the fort was on fire, he would not give up, but worked away at the burning timbers till his hands were burned nearly to a crisp. At another time he was taken prisoner by the Indians and bound to a tree. The bullets and the arrows flew on every side of him. One officer shot at him for the fun of it, but neither bullet or arrow struck him, although many of them struck the tree to which he was bound. It seemed indeed as if he bore a charmed life. When the British began to land in New York, old Put led one division of the colonial army out of the city by way of the Hudson River road. He was to meet Washington not far up the river, and then together they intended to retreat. Now it happened that at just the time Putnam was going up the river road, a British division was coming down. Mrs. Robert Murray, a good Quaker woman, who, although she did not believe in war and fighting, was nevertheless a staunch friend of the colonists, learned of the danger and resolved to save General Putnam. The British redcoats, marching nearer and nearer, came until her advanced guard were at her very gate. Going forth to meet them, she saluted the officers and invited them to stop and eat lunch beneath her trees upon the lawn. The officers, tired and dusty with marching under the hot August sun, gladly accepted her seemingly generous hospitality. She brought forth fresh bread with sweet golden butter, and gave them plenty of cold, foaming milk to drink, cake and fruits, everything that her house or garden could afford. She talked with them, showed them about her mansion, and in every way attempted to keep them pleasantly occupied until she was sure General Putnam had passed in the road below. When at length the British division resumed its march, the sun had sunk nearer the west, the air was cooler, the men were refreshed and rested, and best of all, General Putnam and his division had gone on far up the road and out of sight. At last, toward the end of the war, this daring general was taken very ill. So strong was his will that, although helpless and often in great pain, he lived on until the Revolution was over. He was bold and daring, had no mercy on his enemy in battle, and when fighting, fought, as his soldiers used to say, like a very wildcat. Still, for all that, he was generous and had as kind a heart as ever beat. He was not ashamed to be gentle with his friends. Every one who knew him loved him. And when at the good old age of 72 he died, he was mourned by all. Every honor was paid him by the country he had so loved and for which he had so bravely fought. End of chapter 41. Chapter 42 of American History Stories, Volume 2. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. American History Stories, Volume 2, by Laura L. Pratt. Chapter 42. Benjamin Franklin. One of the wisest men of the times was Benjamin Franklin. You have all heard about him, I presume. There are so many stories of his boyhood, which no doubt you have read in your reading book. He was a very poor boy, that is as far as money goes, but he had something in his little head that made him richer than the richest boy that ever scampered with him across Boston Common. At 10 years old he was taken from school to assist his father in his business of tallow candler and soap boiler. I was employed, he says, in cutting wicks for the candles, attending the shop, and going on errands. Not liking this trade, however, Benjamin was apprenticed, at the age of 12, to his brother James, a printer. Here he stayed for 5 years, but as he did not get along very well with his brother, he determined to start out and seek his fortune. Here is an account of his journey as told by himself. My friend Collins agreed with the captain of a New York sloop for my passage to that city, so I sold some of my books to raise a little money, and as we had a fair wind, in 3 days I found myself in New York, near 300 miles from home, a boy of but 17, without the least knowledge of any person in the place, and with very little money in my pocket. I offered my service to the printer in the place, old Mr. William Bradford. He could give me no employment, having little to do, but says he, "My son at Philadelphia has lately lost his principal man. If you go there, I believe he may employ you." Philadelphia was 100 miles further. I set out, however, in a boat for Amboy, leaving my chest and things to follow me round the sea. From there I proceeded on foot, 50 miles to Burlington, where I was told I should find boats that would carry me the rest of the way to Philadelphia. It rained very hard all day. I was thoroughly soaked, and by noon a good deal tired, so I stopped at a poor inn, where I stayed all night, beginning now to wish that I had never left home. I cut so miserable a figure, too, that I found by the questions asked me I was suspected to be some runaway servant, and in danger of being taken up on that suspicion. However, I proceeded the next day, and got in the evening to Burlington. Walking there by the side of the river, a boat came by, which I found was going towards Philadelphia. They took me in, and as there was no wind, we rowed all the way. We arrived at Philadelphia about 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, and landed at the Market Street wharf. I have been the more particular in this description of my journey to Philadelphia, and shall be so of my first entry into that city, that you may in your mind compare such unlikely beginnings with the figures I have since made there. I was in my working dress, my best clothes being to come round by sea. I was dirty from my journey. My pockets were stuffed out with shirts and stockings, and I knew no soul, or where to look for lodging. I was fatigued with traveling, rowing, and want of rest. I was very hungry, and my whole stock of cash consisted of a Dutch dollar and about a shilling in copper. I walked up a street, gazing about, till near the market house I met a boy with bread. I had made many a meal on bread, and inquiring where he had bought it, I went immediately to the baker's he directed me to, in Second Street, and asked for a biscuit, intending such as we had in Boston. But they, it seems, were not made in Philadelphia. Then I asked for a threepenny loaf, and was told they had none such. So not knowing the difference of money, or the greater cheapness, or the names of the bread, I bade him give me 3 pennyworth of any sort. He gave me accordingly 3 great puffy rolls. I was surprised at the quantity, but took it, and having no room in my pockets, walked off with a roll under each arm, and eating the other. Thus I went up Market Street as far as Fourth Street, passing by the door of Mr. Reed, my future wife's father, when she, standing at the door, saw me, and thought I made, as I certainly did, a most awkward and ridiculous appearance. I then turned and went down Chestnut Street, and part of Walnut Street, eating my roll all the way. Coming round, I found myself again at Market Street wharf, near the boat I came in, to which I went for a draught of the river water, and being filled with one of my rolls, I gave the other 2 to a woman and her child, who came down the river in the boat with us, and were waiting to go farther. Thus refreshed, I walked again up the street, which by this time had many clean-dressed people in it who were all walking the same way. I joined them, and thereby was led into a great meeting-house of the Quakers, near the market. I sat down among them, and after looking round a while and hearing nothing said, being very drowsy through labor and want of rest the preceding night, I fell fast asleep, and continued so till the meeting broke up, when one was kind enough to rouse me. This was, therefore, the first house I was in, or slept in Philadelphia. It was this Franklin that made the wonderful first discoveries in electricity, and he made them by means of a kite with a small thread, by which he found that he could bring down the lightning. Chapter 42.